Okay, we're good? Okay. All right, I'd like to call to order the Village of Ashwaubenon Finance and Personnel Committee meeting for Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. Roll call, please.
Chris Serbo,
Here.
Tracy Flukie,
Here.
Kelly Service,
Here.
Tom Silk is excused, Tim Jaden,
Here. All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, please keep in mind our men and women here and abroad that are helping, keeping us safe and free. Action on the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays, nothing. Motion carries. Action on minutes from May 21, 2024.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Action on the consent agenda.
Did we have one?
There is nothing on the
There's
consent
nothing.
agenda, so you can proceed forward.
Actually, did we need to update anything on the, the action on the agenda? Was there was a,
That's park board maybe?
oh, that's right, never mind.
Yeah.
I'm at the wrong meeting. Okay, 7 action items. Consider, discuss 2025 budget and draft 5-year capital improvement plan. All right, here we go.
All right, I'll touch base. I think Greg will kind of also cue in here from time to time as we work through it. So in your meeting packet, and the board members have already seen this. This has been shared with the village board at our prior meeting. But Tim, this is new for you being new on the committee. Included in the packet is the overall budget schedule timeline that kind of outlines the process and procedure that we use administratively to prepare the executive budget for the village. That ultimately comes to both a combined finance and personnel committee and village board at the end of October or first part of November, based on that calendar timeline. So we begin the budget process. I should say Greg really kind of initiates the budget process from a finance standpoint, usually in the early parts of summer or maybe even late spring, and then it starts to kind of roll out incrementally in June and July of every year. So staff have been very busy with budget process this particular year in general, because we did a 5-year capital improvement plan dating back all the way to, I think, March even. So they've been pretty much full go on budgetary type thought and process since that time. In fact, the overall operating budget for both general fund, special revenue funds, and enterprise funds, those are all technically due this week from staff. I think it's this coming Monday, excuse me. And at that point, finance packages that information together, and then it makes its way to myself, Greg, and Mary, and we review and scrutinize the budget, and then we end up meeting with the department heads to evaluate what we can do to adjust the budget to fit within the overall goals of what we're trying to accomplish for the next fiscal year. So at the last budget meeting, staff kind of talked with the board about a number of factors that are providing implications to the overall budget process. So one of the things that we're predominantly concerned with going into 2025 is the upcoming NFL draft. We recognize that there could be a potential for that to produce an expenditure need that we're not typically used to. So we want to basically be in a position to set aside funds within our general fund budget to account for what could be unforeseen expenditures that we really can't put a concrete figure to. So there's going to be an effort even in this fiscal year to take any reserve fund balance that we have produced, or a portion of that anyway, and put it towards that draft activity for next year. In addition to that, we've recognized over the last few years we've had substantial growth in our general fund operating budget. We've had some growth in our tax levy, and because of some of the pressures that I think our residents are facing in our community, we wanted to do the best we can to maintain a very minimal tax levy increase, if at all, for next year. So some of the directives that we've given to our staff is that we're taking what we're calling a modified zero-based budget approach. And essentially what that means is we want to come in with a tax levy that doesn't increase beyond what net new construction provides. And what that means is net new construction are the new taxpayers into your community that are going to be paying taxes. Think of all the new development that are certainly outside of the TID districts. Any improvements that are being made throughout the community, those are new taxpayers. And because of that, those new taxpayers were able to increase the amount of our levy without impacting the pocketbook, if you will, of the existing residents that were here years prior. And so we had a net new construction rate of, I believe, 3.8%. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but in the grand scheme of net new construction, that is a fairly sizable figure that will produce a few $100,000 of additional tax levy that otherwise was not available to us in prior years. So we are looking to maximize that net new construction. Not to get too far into the weeds, but that's important to maximize that because the state also imposes what's called levy limits. And we're only able to, typically, if we are completely up against our levy limit max, we are only able to increase our levy to the rate of net new construction. So if you don't utilize that additional levy option, you lose that levy option. So it's important for us to use it when we receive it so that we can maintain that. If we choose not to use the net new construction figure, there is an opportunity for municipalities to lose that in future years. And so we want to take advantage of that. So that modified approach, that net new construction is really going to be geared towards essential components. Our two largest expenditures are wages, salaries, and benefits. So a lot of that additional net new construction is going to be going towards maintaining a proper workforce and work pool to deliver the services to the community. It would not be going towards other new initiatives per se outside of, let's say, the NFL draft at this point in time. Tonight you'll be talking about the wage and salary increases that are being proposed in accordance to village policy. So those stand at about 2.9%, which is the rate of inflation year over year. But we also are working through our medical insurance program for 2025, which we plan to present to this committee next month so that we're ready for open enrollment in November. And again, we will likely see some rate increases on that front as well, which is what you would typically see year over year. So department heads are tasked with, outside of wages and benefits, any of the operating expenditures, trying to keep that at a kind of a net zero affair, meaning that if they want to add a program, add a service, or add things to their budget, they're going to need to find efficiencies or other avenues outside of that. So there's 3 modifications that staff have been given directive of, and that is finding new revenues outside of taxes. So if there's an opportunity to generate additional revenue to provide for a service, they're welcome to do that, but just identify that in the budget book. Cost recovery, so if they can find efficiencies with their current operations and those efficiencies can then be used towards modifying or tweaking a service, they can do that as well. And then any overall service adjustment. So maybe there is just simply a service that we currently provide that we should no longer provide, and making that very explicit in the budget book, thus creating some savings to put towards a new program or service. So that is kind of the overall operating budget. As I mentioned, budget items are due to finance coming Monday. We'll have a more clearer picture in the following weeks after we've met with department heads and see where our progress is with our efforts to maintain a kind of a flat tax levy, if you will, if at all possible. And then we will be scheduling meetings with this committee and the village board coming forward. One last thing before I kind of pass it off to Greg and can kind of talk through the CIP process a little bit is, and this is more for the village board at this point in time, but we are looking to schedule a special meeting to talk about the enterprise funds as well. Even though they will be approved, their budgets will be approved as part of the normal process. As you're aware, there's some factors that need to be considered, in particular rate increases that are occurring at New Water, Green Bay Water, and then some concerns that we're having with stormwater. So when the village board meets next week, they'll be discussing the possibility of setting up a special meeting to talk through those items. So with that, I'll pass it on to Greg, and Greg can kind of talk through CIP a little bit and maybe add any commentary to the budget process.
Thank you. So, yeah, as Joel mentioned, we started we've always had a CIP, if you will, but it wasn't as well organized. So we really focused on making that a higher priority. So as we lead into the budget season, we've identified larger projects, larger capital items that are out there and can address those accordingly. Because, like we've mentioned, operationally, other than wages, we try to keep things fairly status quo as far as services or finding efficiencies. So really, these are bigger ticket items that are out there that different committees might recommend, or they're just needs in general for improvements. So you should have both drafts that went to the board in late August. And you can see that it's quite an extensive list. So there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of recommendations. So it's really, as we go through the budget process, it's trying to identify priorities within these and then funding sources at the end of the day. What can we absorb each year? What are those priorities that are absolutely necessary? There's a lot of discussion, bringing in each individual department head and their perspectives and potential other committee recommendations, things like to that effect. So as you can see, you've got a summary report here, and then we just gave you kind of the detail for just the current year, 2025. There's just a lot out there. There's a lot of needs, a lot of different projects that are asked about and talked about and needed. So these will be introduced to the budget process as well. Again, identifying funding is always the biggest challenge. There's a separate one for vehicles, so that's the same thing. Vehicles have, over the years, been an area where we have kind of pushed things off, and it came to a head a couple of years ago where we've just got to replace these bigger pieces of equipment. The day-to-day smaller fleet vehicles, if you will, the pickup trucks, things like that. We've been fairly consistent with, but if we're talking dump trucks, garbage trucks, that we said, hey, maybe we can get a few more years of life out of those, maybe a few more years, and next thing you know, it's 20, 25 years old, and it needs to be replaced. The largest challenge, I will say, with the vehicles is inflation. So a dump truck 5-10 years ago, today is 2 or 3 times the cost. A fire truck, same thing, these larger pieces. So those are things we need to address in the budget. This is a self-funded fund, similar to our health, which means that we will charge back the depreciation to the departments on an annual basis, and that's to recoup the money to buy the next one down the road. Public Works has all the equipment, they have a charge on their budget line for their depreciation. So it's really important that we're refocusing on the depreciable life of these assets so that we don't hang on to something for 20 years and we haven't recouped cost for 10, and now we're trying to scramble and find money. So it's a good exercise. We're looking at a variety of options on maybe quicker fleet replacement to get a higher resale value, passing down within departments that can use, and then maybe a 6-year life versus a 15-year life, because we can get a higher resale value. Looking at our fleet, what do we really need? Just because we bought vehicle X, is that the vehicle you have to have? Maybe it's not that size, maybe it's something different. So it's been a good exercise with department heads, as Joel mentioned. This is stuff they've been working on for months now, leading into the budget. So those are all incorporated into this whole process. There's cost line items for those as well into the budget, and all that just comes into place.
And the key for this particular group in getting this information out, this is in draft form. So this is sent out to Village Board, to various committees that oversee some projects, Bike and Ped, for example. They have the same draft form. They've had meetings where they've reviewed this information and provided some recommendations to changes, and that's perfectly acceptable to do so. This, again, is just draft form. When we get to that point in conversation with the whole board about the overall budget, that's where these projects will start to come up and have a more robust dialogue as to what the priority is of the village board, because then you start seeing the entire pieces being played out together simultaneously. So we wanted to make sure you had it. There's a lot of information there. It takes some time to go through it and understand it. So we wanted to make sure that got out at least a month in advance before we start really deliberating on specific projects and tasks. So no action is necessary on this particular item tonight. This is just for your information in preparation for those future meetings, but I know Tracy has a question.
Just a quick question for Greg. So the vehicle capital improvement plan that you have, so are these vehicles and equipment that in there, are they part of the equipment replacement fund now? We've been saving for them? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so this is not new that we haven't been budgeting for and charging back for years.
So,
But the amount may be higher just because of cost, but,
yep. Yeah, a patrol vehicle for police, for example, when I started, I know it's 17 years ago, they were 20-some thousand dollars. Now it's 70,000. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they have to get certain types of engines and bodies and all the extras, so, yeah.
okay, thank you.
When you say 3.8% of new construction, define new construction.
So it's considered net new construction.
Net new
So what they mean by that is it could be a number of factors. So it could be brand new homes being constructed, it could be new development that occurs, but it's the net of the prior improvement, let's say, on that particular project. So you may have land and improvements valued at $100,000, and they make construction to that particular improvement. It's the net between the new construction value and the prior construction value of that particular parcel. So you don't get the full value of it, it's the net between the different. difference.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, yeah, so it's, okay. Yeah. So it's basically 3.8, it's of, construction or improvements?
Yes, correct. Could be brand new construction entirely, so these are brand new taxpayers. Could be existing taxpayers, of course, but they've added value to their particular property.
Okay, thank you.
Now, and I should say that not artificially through just market conditions, physical improvements to their property that would have expanded its size or the nature or scope of that particular property. So this doesn't take into account just market adjustments to the value because of market conditions. That's not factored into that 3.8%.
Okay,
And that's part of that net. So those aren't part of the net new construction or new value.
yeah, okay. All right, information only, any other questions on this?
Nope.
Okay. We'll move on. B, consider, discuss act, recommendation on draft 2024 salary and wage grade matrix for non-represented general employees and LT/seasonal wage matrix. Joel?
Okay, thank you, Chris. Real quickly, before we do that, I just wanted to introduce Patrick, which most of the board members know, but Tim might know. Patrick is in the blue shirt back there. He's our village attorney / deputy village manager, kind of basically helping out with overseeing the human resources function. We've been talking a lot about new staff, and we haven't had a committee meetings yet since we've hired our full-time human resources generalist, but Megan Noltner is in the back as well. Megan is with us also providing the leadership and guidance from the human resources function as well. So future meetings, you will likely encounter more of them and less of me, which I'm sure you're very pleased with that concept. But wanted to introduce them because they're really involved in this process as well. As part of our employee handbook and policy for the village of Ashwaubenon, we review our employee wage matrix, our salary and wage matrix for non-represented employees. So these are general employees that are not a sworn position within public safety. Does include some positions within public safety, but again, those are non-sworn individuals. Think of records, think of evidence technicians, fire inspectors, so on and so forth. Sworn positions are bound by contract language within the collective bargaining agreement, and so those are factored in separately and not taken into consideration. The limited term employment and seasonal wage matrix, those again are non-represented employees. Think of parkies, lifeguards, concessionaires, things of that nature. In accordance to village policy, we review those matrix every year, and we propose making adjustments to it to cost of living increases. We use the Bureau of Labor Statistics annual report, July over July, and that's for all urban environments. And based on that figure that we received from them, which was published on August 14th, the CPI increase was 2.9%. So we take that 2.9%, we apply it to the base wage of the matrix, so that's step one. And then each step beyond that gets extended based on that base wage. So the matrix essentially works, if you recall, is we have a base wage, and then each step beyond the base wage is a 2% increase. So whatever that base wage becomes, it automatically reflects through step 15 within the matrix. And so we are proposing to comply with the policy as it's written. Of course, the village board does retain discretion as to whether it's going to use that. The nice thing about the matrix is that it keeps everything wholly objective. We don't look at positions, we don't look at personnel. We look at the matrix, and based on how the matrix is determined, that then carries forward objectively to a variety of different positions and people within the organization. So no adjustments this year beyond CPI. For those of you that were on the committee for the last couple of years, you know that we've done some adjustments to the matrix itself to reflect competitive, comparable market wages. We are not proposing any changes beyond CPI this year. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
So you said CPI covers all urban areas, not just, I'd call it regionally or Wisconsin, it's national?
Correct, it's a national percentage, so it's not so much the wage, but the percent increase on the cost of living.
Okay.
Correct.
Have we looked at just Wisconsin, just Midwest? Does it vary at all from the national average?
It does. So traditionally, the Wisconsin Employment Commission does produce a cost of living increase. I haven't pulled it up for today's meeting. The last couple of years, Wisconsin has been higher than the national average. We've just traditionally used the national average. Could we change the policy to reflect just Wisconsin? Certainly. But at this point, it's just been the national that we use.
Okay.
Joel, can you go through the Department of Labor changes that are requiring that $1,000 increase for our exempt, or no? Yeah, our exempt employees with a certain salary level?
Yeah, so the Fair Labor Standards Act, there's been an administrative rule change from the current federal administration. So the executive branch of the government issued a rule change that moves the threshold for what would be considered a minimum salary amount for an exempt level employee. So these are employees that are not eligible for overtime. I don't have the exact number right in front of me, but essentially what that did is it moved it to a threshold that is beyond what our current minimum salary would be for grade 6. So it would be just over, I think it was $58,655, I believe, is the minimum threshold in order for a position to be considered exempt. So obviously we're slightly ahead of that, but what we did in our proposal is we took the base wage for grade 6, we added the 2.9%. It was just short, or about $1,000 short of the minimum salary threshold. So just to make it clean, we said, let's just add a flat $1,000 to the base amount so that we reach the minimum threshold for that exempt status under FALSA. We elected to do that versus reclassify positions, because if we reclassify positions, then we're basically moving them to a higher grade, and nothing has really changed about their position, just the fact that there's this federal mandate now that they have to meet this minimum threshold to be considered exempt staff. So it's one of the conditions that are required to maintain exempt status.
So it's just really grade 6 that's impacted by that.
Correct. Just grade 6 is the only one that's impacted. That was the only grade that received kind of that lump sum adjustment.
Okay.
It was just it was $1,000. It was attached to the base salary, which then correlated to the remainder steps. Correct.
Okay.
I'll move to recommend the village board adopt the 2024 salary and wage grade matrix and LTE seasonal wage matrix adjusted as presented.
I'll second, and should that be 2025? Or is it 2024?
It should be 2025 salary and wage matrix. Yes. Sorry, that was a typo in the recommendation.
So we have a motion and a second with the change of the year to 2025. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Items for next agenda. Anybody want to see anything? I imagine we're going to be pretty heavy into the budget.
Yeah, so October, we'll be discussing the health insurance or medical, dental, vision plan benefit with the committee, and that will eventually make its way to the village board. And then, we will be heavy into October with a variety of different budget factors, as I mentioned, more at the board level, having conversations about rate increases as a result of changes from Green Bay Water and Blue Water.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. We are adjourned.
You did it.